What's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and last week I think, right? A couple days ago, I made a patch 11.1 PTR DPS tier list, both melee and range, for Mythic Plus. Now, a lot changed over the past 24 to 48 hours. Meta shifted a little bit. A lot of class tunings come in. So today, we are updating that tier list. All right, now hopping right into this, like we talked about, in the past 24 to 48 hours, there's been a lot of class tuning that's come in. Some classes are buffed, some were nerfed, and many, including Sir Titles, are heralding that Augmentation Evoker is dead in Mythic Plus, finally. Now, we've heard this a handful of times in the past, and in the end, it really hasn't been that case, but it really does feel like these final nerfs that hit Aug yesterday are quite possibly the nail in the coffin that's going to take Aug from S tier, being basically, hey, every comp is a tank, a healer, an Aug, and 2 DPS, to being, hey, 3 DPS again. The changes that hit Aug: Shifting Sands Verse was nerfed by 20% overall effectiveness. Closest Clutch Mates was 25%, which is basically the bonus to Ebonite and Breath of Aeons. It is now 10%. Closest Clutch Mates is like Psychic Link in a sense of they get adjusted so many times, it seems like every single patch. It is actually insane. That has been taken down substantially. At the same time, they've also ended up nerfing Breath of Aeons. It was 10%. The accumulation factor, it is now 8%. So accumulation factor nerf, Breath of Aeons, Ebonite nerf through Clutch Mates, and Shifting Sands being hit by 20% does indeed take Aug, I would also agree, out of the S tier part of the metacomp and just throwing them somewhere down here. That does bring to question Devastation Evoker, because they do have that solid stat cleave profile. They've been solid in plus in the past, not like what's considered ultimate meta, but they've been solid, and they do indeed bring that very good evoker utility, right? We're not playing a preservation evoker this tier. It looks to likely be a disc priest or a mistweaver, possibly. Even with disc being nerfed, they still look very strong. Where does this put Devastation Evoker? Now, I'm pretty sure on my last list I ended up putting them somewhere like in the A tier range. They did indeed receive, I think, a buff this week. Yeah, a 6% buff this week, and I believe they ended up getting a 4% one last week. Now, they also adjusted their tier set. It no longer grants Essence Burst procs from Shattering Stars, or Essence Burst from Shattering Stars. I don't know if that's like a compensation buff or if it equaled out a bit less, a bit worse. It does seem like they're still going to be solid when it comes to overall damage, from what I've heard. I haven't seen any in plus since then. I'm going to leave them in the A tier, probably like in the middle-ish part of here. But if you are a fan of Aug, one of 5 players out there, sorry to say, but it does indeed look like Aug is likely not going to be part of the metacomp anymore, at least with, most predictions out there. Now, as far as let's jump into Mage here. You obviously have both Fire and Frost, which have been very good over the course of PTR. I'm actually astonished that Fire didn't really catch any bullets, any strays this week, or actual nerfs. I think if you're looking at just making a comp right now, more of a range-based comp, Fire is your easy slot in here as your number 1 DPS. The output they have is it's insane. It's consistent. They have solid single target, solid AoE, infinite utility, lust, they can't die, immunities, mass res, invis, whatever you want a mage can do. Fire looks to be insane. It's still exceptionally strong, and that's just that. Frost also looking pretty strong here. I think they are likely more in the middle-ish part of A+ tier. If Fire did indeed get gutted for some reason, I wouldn't be too surprised if you did see a Frost Mage pop up. It's like that third-ish slot in more of a range comp for M+. Gonna leave him at A+ tier here, but unsurprisingly, when there's a new meta, the word Mage is almost like meta, and they're pretty much one and the same. Every single tier. Arcane is sort of whatever again. I probably just put them down here in B tier, give or take. I haven't really seen any Arcane Mages in the last few weeks on PTR at all. Fire is cranking, Frost is solid. I believe they got a buff a couple weeks ago, or last week, I think a little bit, but from what I've heard, the damage output is a bit subpar. And when you're looking at things like Fire and or Frost, it sort of makes sense as to why I haven't seen a whole lot of Arcane Mages. When it comes to Ellie Shaman, this is also an interesting one here because I'm not really sure where they're going to land. Now, Ellie, I feel like Ellie's a spec that's sort of been sitting, it's been solid, but sleeper, right? It's been overshadowed by Enhanced Shaman being exceptionally strong over the course of 11.0. Even for most of this PTR, Enhanced has been really strong. Enhanced caught a nerf last week, and then a few days later, I think it caught a Storm Strike nerf, I'm pretty sure as well, which puts Enhanced, I don't think, really in this S tier anymore. Also because you can form more of a melee comp versus, a range comp in a sense here. It does indeed feel like if I'm putting Enhance in the actual A+ slot here, it's probably on the higher end of A+. I don't think it's like full actual meta yet, but it definitely is in contention. The damage output they have is very, very strong. Stormkeeper, 1 minute CD, they bring a Sky Fury buff, and they've just been solid, but they've been sort of flying under the radar. I don't see many Elemental Shamans really anywhere. I have a friend that plays one, but it's basically all I see. I don't see them anywhere, right? But whenever I do look at a video of one playing one, the damage seems exceptionally strong, and I've heard this echoed by multiple players over the course of like later parts of PTR. Ellie is great, but you don't see it anywhere. So I'm gonna put them in the higher end of A tier here. I do think if you're looking at like a caster heavy kind of comp here, maybe like Fire Mage, Ellie Shaman, and throwing a Destro Lock, whatever in here, or something else caster wise that can benefit from, you know, the more range-esque comp here, it very well could be like a Fire Mage, Ellie Shaman, you know, Lock X comp. But as far as Enhance is concerned here too, I think they're probably also A tier. But I mean, like they both bring Sky Fury. If you can bring that Wind Fury-esque part of Sky Fury, that relevance to more of a melee-based group, also could be strong. But overall, I'm probably gonna leave both an A+ here, A+ tier here, and see where that shakes out. There might be more tuning this week before the actual season drops as well, and that may shake things up a little bit also. But I'm gonna leave them both right here and see where that ends up going. Now, we'll get into Affliction Warlock here. Why not? Lock stuff. I do make lock content, but Affliction Warlock is in a very interesting spot. It was buffed yesterday, the day before, whatever it was. They buffed a lot of the single target. Now, some of the single target changes they made have also affected our AoE. But Affliction's AoE has been solid for a long time. It's not bad. It has, when you have your Vile Taint and your Soul Rot and your Dark Glare and your Malevolence, you can pop that and just nuke the world. But unfortunately, unlike, you know, Demonology Warlock or other classes, Affliction's not very consistent from pack to pack. When you pop your 1 minute CDs and your 2 minute CDs together, when you obliterate that pack, burst to one of the highest DPS in the game right now, probably with full CDs and AoE, it dies so fast, you go to the next pack, you have no damage at all. You have a Vile Taint, and that's basically it, and you're below the tank. Consistency is important. And Affliction and that, don't mix. Just like AF and Quality Life. Don't mix. The burst is very, very strong in AoE. Single target AF is lacking. Every lock spec lacks in single target. It is flashy saying the class be buff and go into a new, you know, a new week of PTR testing and nuke the world. But when it comes to actual like utility, lock has utility in a sense in like M+. We don't have Arcane Elect. We don't have Sky Fury. We don't have, you know, Fort. We don't have PI, right? It's more like Health Stones and Soul Stones, which is a little eh. I think AF is on the higher end of A tier here due to like just, if you're building a comp, you want to have a good bit of time. I mean, like you can bring a Destro Lock, filling in that niche like mass AoE element that you want. Maybe in certain dungeons, like what's out there this patch? Trying to think. Some polls in Workshop. The new zone, Floodgate, has a lot of mass AoE at certain points that Destro can just nuke the world in, right? But at the same time, like, you want to supplement with other prio specs at times, a bit more, you know, funnel-esque, Patrick-based damage. AF can do that with CDs, like for that AoE, but it's not as big of a mass AoE profile as Destro on the higher end. I think Destro probably is in the A+ tier here, somewhere probably in here, probably above Frost due to, like, Devil Mage not being as probably somewhere around here. I would put it in this vicinity, but Destro, like Affliction, is lacking a bit when it comes to single target. Now, Destro is more consistent. I think players are seeing a lot of... What's on my shirt? Oh, it's bleach. I'm not editing that out. Okay. Anyways, I think players are seeing a lot of... they've seen a lot of footage of Destro just melting the world on PTR, which it was for a very long time, up until last week, when the bug with, I think, Demon Fire Infusion was fixed, that did end up nerfing Destro in AoE. It was a talent that was proccing basically at a 30% chance. It should have been 4%. And it procced based off of the number of dots you had out. Destro is uncapped on the number of dots you can put out with Cataclysm. So you can see how insane it was. And whenever it procced, the bolt it fired cleaved. So Destro took a pretty big hit when it came to that bug being fixed. A bit in single target, a good bit in AoE. It's still very solid and brings that mass, huge uncapped AoE profile that, you know, is often sought after in M+. But it is a bit lacking in single target. When you're building another comp out, it's not the most utility compared to some other classes here and there. I think it is A+ tier here, looking at my own like rating scale here, but AF is definitely a bit lower, and the stat. Looking at Demonology as well, Demo's damage is solid. Like, but the problem is, like, unless you're like me or a few other players, you know, People just play Destro a good bit on PTR. I've played Demo. It is very consistent. The damage profile reminds me a lot of a BM Hunter, which is actually over here, it should be here, of a BM Hunter, where you have like solid damage every single pack. BM CDs are short. Demo has shorter CDs that aren't as impactful, but you have those CDs every pack, and your core rotation just does cleave in general. Hand of Gul'dan, Fellstorm, Demonic Strength, Implosion Cleave, Dreadstalker's Biting. Your tier set also builds further upon Destro's damage profile. Stat Cleave, if you cast a Hand of Gul'dan, the tier set Dog you spawn chomps again, does more AoE. The damage profile is strong, it's not A+ tier. Click the wrong row. Sorry about that. The problem though is that with Demonology, you're even more locked into like semi-niche utility. Your Felguard, not a Fel Hunter. Longer kick, it's a stun, not like a full lock like Hunter is. No Dispel, no Purge, a bit of awkwardness with certain talents and things in different areas. Pet AI can be a little funky at times, but for the most part, Demo's damage is solid, just it's not really the profile that you're looking for in a high-end M+ group, looking at comp, utility, and all that being taken into account. I think for consistency, it's ahead of Affliction here, but I do think that AF, like, with that high burst profile on certain polls is also relevant. AF can funnel a little bit as well when it comes to, like, not a crazy amount, but a little bit. I'm going to leave them both in A tier here, but I think there's possibilities that you might see a bit more Demo once the season shakes out over Affliction, just due to like how it plays and a bit of a redundant-esque kind of profile with Destro versus AF. Comparatively, like Demo in these like mid-tier keys, like pugging 7s, 8s, and 10s, Demo is likely your better option than Destro. You're not pulling 3 or 4 packs. They're not living for a minute. They're living for 10 seconds. So you're pulling 1 pack. In that case, I'm playing Demonology. Now, you have the other remaining ranged here. I think that's it, right? For ranged, yeah. You have Shadow Priest, Boomkin, Beastmaster Hunter, and Marks. Marks, I've heard the AoE is good. I really haven't seen many. There's like a I don't know kind of tier here. Haven't seen much. I put it there. I'm just going to throw it in B tier. I think I had it in B tier last time. I actually had it in C tier. It's a bump to B. Haven't really seen many. In a world where BM is there, you're probably playing BM. Now, I will say, when it comes to Hunter, Marks did get a 6% buff, which is something. I've heard the AoE is good. I think Azar Theory was talking about it today with Max. At the same time, I mean, I haven't seen any. So, like, it's a bit hard to actually rate them overall here. But BM's profile is consistent. Now, I will say BM got an 8% aura nerf this week, which makes things a lot more interesting. Their profile is still consistent. Their AoE consistent and strong. Their single target is also strong. They bring some utility. Hunter's Mark, not that really that good in plus compared to like Mage, Infinite Utility, or, you know, Shaman, Sky Fury, and all that. But I think they're in discussion for like maybe being part of like that third DPS, because once again, Aug is not part, what we assume, of this meta comp anymore. I'm going to put them on the lower end of A+ here, and that might end up changing, but at this current point, just gotta sort of wait and see what shakes out next week before the patch hits, and, you know, week 1 tuning due to the raid coming out. Shadow Priest is also sort of an anomaly here. I've seen people saying Shadow Priest is easily part of Metacomp. I've seen people saying it's like A+. I've seen some saying it's A. Public, who's a great friend of mine, somebody I love very dearly, put it below Destro Lock earlier on Max's list. Okay, memes aside, Destro's probably a bit better in the high end. I think when it comes to like rating Shadow, though, it's sort of tough. I'm not a Shadow Priest main. I haven't really seen many M+ lately. They did get some decent buffs this week. A 13% aura buff to the actual spec, but a lot of nerfs to their tier set. They cut the 2-piece, I think, in half. I believe 2-piece, it triggers less often than 2-piece. Void Bolt now does 100% more damage, was 200, and the 4-piece increases the damage of Mind Blast, and Void Bolt by 10 was 15. So I don't know if this is like a buff or nerf overall. I heard Shadow's tier was like 26% of a DPS gain, which obviously is too much. I think on the higher end, tier's been like 15%, I think, for some classes and patches. 26 is too much, so I'm assuming a bit of compensation buff. 13% aura is actually a lot. I feel like if you're looking at like a range comp, you could put them like as a third DPS, but it also brings the question, what are your tanks and healers this season? You're looking at like what? Prom Paladin, Benches, Demon Hunter, and healers. I mean, Disc was nerfed, and I know Jack's up in arms about that. Disc Priest, I've seen some Holy lately on PTR. Not sure how it's holding up in M+ comparatively to like playing a Mistweaver, which can bring Mystic Touch to certain groups, maybe more like a melee heavy comp, depending where that goes. But Double Priest, it seems odd. Like, you've got multiple PIs floating around, which is like not terrible, but not optimal. Double Fort's a bit of like redundancy when it comes to overall utility. I'm probably just gonna throw on the higher end of A here, probably like the highest rank up A overall. It's possible it could sneak in as a third DPS if you end up playing like a Mistweaver or something of non-priest healing component, but I feel like putting it here with us being a little unsure is likely the better call for Shadow, and potential to go up in maybe like a third DPS slot in comp. But at this point, I think A is probably where I would end up putting it. Boomkin is interesting, man. Tettle's gonna chew me out for this one. I'm throwing Boomkin up here as a potential third DPS and more of a range comp. Mark of the Wild is strong, man. You're not playing Guardian Druid this tier in M+. You're probably not playing a Resto Druid either. Mark is strong. 3% versus big. And I'm going to be honest, I've been on PTR with a lot of Boomkins. They crank. Now, I've heard the single target isn't like stellar. And people say it's like, oh, it's pad damage in a sense. Maybe to a certain extent it is. But like, if you can build a group around having a Boomkin in it for that Mark buff, and also like build around their pad-esque or AoE-esque profile, sort of how Destro is in certain pulls, with other classes to supplement damage in areas where Boomkin doesn't really have it, it can be strong. Yeah, I think it definitely is in contention for that more range-based S+ kind of group here, if you're like on the outside looking in. So I'm gonna like formulate this ranged, I guess, segment here for like a meta comp. I feel like if you're looking at what you really see here, like it's these other two classes for DPS slotting into more of like the ranged meta group 4 M+. Honestly, man, like I think Destro could be up there, but I'm not like incredibly happy with it. If you're looking at like a range comp only, Destro's solid, but the change like to Demon Fire Infusion did hurt a decent bit. And at the same time, like, you're not going to play a Frost Mage because you already have a Fire Mage unless they're just overtuned damage-wise. We have Enhance here, we shouldn't because we just have melee over here, whatever. You know, no, it is what it is. Even like BM is sort of range melee-esque, depending on what you're looking at. I wouldn't be surprised to see a comp like this. You see like Ellie Shaman or even Boomkin up here. If you can find a way to get Boomkin in a group with Mark buff, so you've got like Mage, Infinite Utility, Arcane Intellect, buffing, Warlock, Destrolock, and Boomkin getting burst buff here. Maybe you can get a Vengeance Demon Hunter in over a Prow Paladin for Chaos Brand and a Priest for Fort and PI and everything. That's a pretty solid stat caster comp, right? I don't even have tanks up here, but if you can get this, I wouldn't be surprised to see something like this possibly even work out for like more of a, where's Disc at? There you go. Like more of a caster heavy base comp here, but at the same time, you could swap in that Boomkin or that Destrolock for that Shaman, for that Sky Fury buff, right? Maybe not getting full value out of the Wind Fury part of it, but still, Fire Mage, Ellie Shaman, Boomkin could also be a thing. I'm going out on a limb here. I think Boomkin's solid. I think it's sort of sleeper. Tettles is trolling us, and he's going to hate me for it, but if he comments, I'll pin it. If not, well, you know, that's that. But let's shift a bit more towards the melee end of the spectrum here and hit on that. All right, shifting into melee stuff here. I did already have Enhance over here, spoiled it in the range section. I was probably just yapping and forgot to move it out of here. We're going to put it in A+ tier and see sort of where that ends up landing. I think it could be part of more of a melee-based comp in general. You could make a case for like an A if you're like, it's more of a caster heavy meta. I'm putting it up here, and we'll talk about it a bit more in a little while. Now, listen, man, I don't really play DK very much, but these things, they live forever. If you want something that lives for a while and all that stuff, ask Legend again. These things, they do some damage, but honestly, I don't know. DK just seems like a sort of mid. They got an Aura buff, I think, this week. They got a, what'd they get? They got a 5% buff to Unholy, all ability and pet damage, and Frost got a 5% buff as well. I mean, listen, man, if they end up being good in certain spots for whatever reason, sure, great. I don't really play him a whole lot. From what I've heard, Frost with Breath of Sindragosa is very, very strong in like burst-based AoE with cooldowns. But outside of that, which is sort of how it's been for Breath for a long time, from what I understand, it is very inconsistent and subpar when it comes to damage. It sort of feels like how Affliction does. You can put him up here, probably in maybe bottom of A tier. I'm not super up on how DK looks in this patch. I haven't seen many, honestly. I think I saw one, and it was pretty subpar. Aura buffs do help a bit, but in the end, I mean, like, the utilities are a little there as well, so they don't die, but I mean, you know, well, Legend dies yeah, that's it. Anyways, putting that aside, so when it comes to other melee heroes, survival, I mean, once again, like, I don't know, you just play BM probably at this point. Survival seems fine. Damage wise, it seemed a bit better than I thought it would be. I was playing with some recently. They have some utility, some traps, some stuns. I think it's single target stun, AoE stun. Hunter's Mark, not that impactful in M+ though. On a boss, I guess. Like, you can't multi Hunter's Mark. You're not spreading it on multiple targets in M+, right? So as far as like that compared to what Aug could bring with utility, or Fire, or Mage, or Shaman with Sky Fury, Boomkin with, or Druid with Mark of the Wild, so on and so forth. Just sort of feels like it's got to be really, really strong with raw damage, sort of how Locke does in a sense, to be part of like a possible meta comp, because the utilities sort of just, you know, Moving on from there, we have, let's go Windwalker Monk. Now, I've played with a couple on PTR. Their damage seems solid, just their spinning crane kick a cap at 5 targets. And there are some dungeons this time around, some pulls in some dungeons, like Floodgate's got some, Mechagon's got some, Dark Flame's got a handful of pulls that are really large target count-wise, and it feels like classes that are just sort of capped when it comes to like their raw AoE just aren't, I mean, what do? Right? You've got classes like Destro Lock and things just can just go in there and just melt the world in like a longer sustained AoE, right? They're not bad. They do indeed bring Mystic Touch, some utility as well. If you're playing a Mistweaver Monk, then I mean, like, you already have Mystic Touch, you might play that as your healer of choice over like Disc and or Holy. I think the Disc things are still a bit of a ETA or a TBD kind of thing. They likely might still end up being the healer of choice depending where it goes. They bring a lot of utility, PI, Fort, so on and so forth. More of a Jack, forte, but that is that. I'm gonna put them at A tier for now. They just like they're just like these part like just the mid classes. They do some damage, they're fine. They're not like utterly insane. Maybe on the lower end here you can play some, but is it like part of the meta comp? Probably not. When it comes to Rep Paladin, their damage also seems good. I mean, even looking at this patch, right, their damage is solid. They have short CDs, they burst for a lot. They have blessings, I mean, Bop, Sack, Freedom, all that kind of stuff, the utility they have. They can't really die. They're like DKs, even better, they just can't really die. The damage has been fine, but once again, I don't know how they fit like if it's more of a melee-based meta comp exceptionally well, and or it's like a meta comp in general. They have like just like this meat grinder kind of DPS, but is it like enough utility meets enough, damage to warrant a spot? Probably not. They're not strong enough raw damage wise just to say, hey, you're part of the comp because you're way overtuned, right? I think they probably are on the higher end of A here, probably like above Demo, probably like second best here overall, below Shadow Priest. I don't really think like they're I would consider them for more of like a melee kind of comp if you're looking to build that and go from there. Now, when it comes to Feral Druid, I had him in A+ tier. Last list. I said I'm going out on a limb here. I had him at A+ tier. And honestly, I've heard more and more talk about Feral this past week and a half. They did receive a buff. It's a 25% auto attack damage increase, adaptive swarm damage increased by 25, Liberation Undermine 2-set big winner. Damage increased by 40%. Very cool. And Wildstalker bursting growth damage, whatever that is. I don't know. Furries, druids, hey, there you go. Their damage has been solid. They have some, niche-ish utility outside of Mark, which is once again very, very strong. Now, are they in contention for that maybe third melee-based DPS spot in a melee-heavy comp? It's possible. If you can get Mark into a comp and build around more melee-based DPS, I think Feral could possibly be at that third DPS. I don't think you're like number one, probably not even number two, but that third slot, that Aug be around, it very well could be. Their AoE is strong, the single target is strong, and I mean, I've been surprised when I've seen them damage-wise. They sort of crank, shout out to the Feral Druids out there, all four of y'all. Now, when it comes to Demon Hunter, I'm going to say I have not played Demon Hunter. I haven't seen any since the actual changes came in. From what I understand, they were playing Eldrazi Reaver. I guess they still are. Eldrazi, whatever it's called, Reaver. They were strong before. Now, they're talking about it in Guild a couple days ago. They had a lot of just raw funnel-based damage. I think Telos talked about it a bit as well a couple days ago too, which has been nerfed a decent bit. They were like, it seemed at least to me that they were relatively consistent, but with their like funnel being nerfed a good bit, it doesn't double dip anymore. The changes were fixing an issue with Wounded Quarry causing Wounded Quarry to double dip with Through All the Fights damage bonus and Mastery Demonic Presence, and also fixing the issue causing Reaver's Glaive to double dip with Thrill of the Fight. With that funnel being nerfed and all that, they do have that consistent ask damage profile, but it sort of feels like they're almost in like that BM like damage profile range. Not saying like they're as good, but I feel like they're probably on the higher end of like A tier here, not like totally being part of like what's considered metacomp stuff here, but not like horrendous either. Probably even like above Demon Hunter or Demonology Warlock at this point. But I haven't seen any in testing over the past couple days. Things are a bit different. Feel free to throw it below, and we can take it into account. But if you're looking at more of a melee heavy comp, I feel like you have enough slots to fill that in regardless of better classes. In range, I mean, well, it does bring Chaos Brand, but like you can just play Vengeance at that point too. So as far as Rogue is concerned, I'm gonna be honest, man. I've seen 0 rogues really over the course of entire PTR. I'm gonna throw them like on the lower end of A to B tier here. I think in my last video I had them. If you're a rogue lover, I'm sorry. Don't hate me. Just I hate the class because they kill me every time I fight them in PvP. I think I had Assassination sitting here. I think I had this sword down here in B, and I think I had a sub sitting up here I think I had an A. I'm sure I had the lower end of A tier. Now, to be fair, once again, I'm not a huge knowledge. I don't have a lot of knowledge on rogue stuff, but I believe they received a handful of buffs this week. Yeah, so Rupture was increased by 6%. Assassination had Crimson Tempest buffs. Area Precision buffs. Outlaw had Precise Cuts, now increases Blade Story damage by 5%, was 4%. Sub had a raw 10% damage buff across the board. And now they had nerfs to their tier set. They nerfed the 2-piece and the actual 4-piece, which is probably just like maybe offset compensation buff, give or take. They just don't seem incredibly impactful this season. Once again, similar to almost like how Havoc sort of feels after their nerfs as well, and Ret and things. You have probably what is considered more of a better melee comp, if need be, compared to like having a rogue mixed in, whether it's Assassination Sub or even like Outlaw or Ret Paladin or a Havoc Demon Hunter, Windwalker Monk. You just have better options, it feels like, based on what we've seen this season. Speaking of those better options, we have Arms Warrior and Furry Warrior. So Arms Warrior is very strong when it comes to single target damage. Fury is being capped at 5 targets and a handful of things, but they're also strong when it comes to damage overall. Now, I've seen groups with Fury Warriors in them, and they crank. I think this season, when it comes to both Fury and Arms, though, I mean, it is like a mass AoE season. In a lot of dungeons, it feels like. We talked about it last video too. At least some pulls in certain dungeons where that Destro Lock can carry. That Fire Mage can help carry a good bit. The classes that aren't capped as much on their AoE can help carry a bit more, right? Floodgate, Mechagon, Dark Flame Cleft, some pulls in Priory are just massive. What else even is there? Trying to think. Theater sort of give or take. Brewery has some pretty big pulls in the hallways. The first area is massive too. If you're looking to bring a class for a bit more like just patchwork based damage and solid cleave, I think Arms could very well be your choice. I'm putting them in A+ tier here, and I think they could be part of the actual like melee comp if we end up building one of those, or ends up being overall. I'm gonna put Fury towards in the bottom of, I guess, mid part of A. Seeing a lot more Arms lately in plus comparatively to Fury. So if you're looking to build more of a melee heavy comp this time around, now that we hit all the melee here, once again, without Aug being in, depending on your tank and healer, if you're doing like a prop paladin and or disc priest, this is probably fine. You can throw these in here. Whatever you end up doing, hey, that works too. Prot, we can go disc priest right here. Maybe you throw a Mistweaver in there. If you bring a disc priest or a priest in general, once again, you have 4 TFPI, a handful of utility here and there. Paladin, million blessings, all that kind of stuff, yada, yada, yada. If you bring a Mistweaver, which is right here, you have Mystic Touch, which also is relatively impactful and could also change things a bit depending how it shakes up a bit. Maybe you want this more for a melee heavy comp. At that point, if you're looking for melee stuff, I could see Enhance, Arms, and honestly, dude, like you could make a case for Feral. I feel like you just sort of bring, I don't know, man, Feral cranks. Like I said it last video, and it looks good. BN is solid too. Not a whole lot of utility. I mean, they have Hunter's Mark, which is not much at all, and plus some stuns and that kind of stuff. But dude, if you can build a comp of like Prop Paladin, Mistweaver for that Mystic Touch, Enhanced Shaman for Sky Fury and the Wind Fury aspect, Arms Warrior and Feral Druid, it looks solid. The question though is like, how are you looking at some of those mass AoE pulls, right? Without that like that Destro Lock mass AoE profile. Can Feral carry enough? Is the mix of like Meat Grinder-esque play enough here as well? Because you're gonna have Sky Fury, you're gonna have Wind Fury, you're gonna have Mark of the Wild, you're gonna have Shout, you're going to have Mystic Touch and Prop Paladin, which is putting out solid damage as well. Is that enough? Honestly, this is really interesting. We haven't seen like a melee based comp in a while without Aug being around providing just that X amount of utility that it brings. I think it's possible that you could sort of see something like this, you know, maybe a melee based comp looking like this. And if we sort of like, you know, shift, we can use this row right here, more of if you're looking at more of like a range-based comp, something like this, possibly looking at a Vengeance Demon Hunter, maybe like a Disc Priest mixed in here, and then playing Fire Mage, Destro Lock, and I mean the third slot, once again, honestly, if you can get a Boomkin in there from Mark of the Wild, super solid. At the same time, Ellie is cranking right now. Very, very good. You're probably not going to play Fire and Frost Mage here, but if you can get like Mark of the Wild in these groups through a Feral Druid, through a Boomkin, Destro Lock, Fire Mage, Disc Priest, and Vengeance could be good. Chaos Brand, PI, Fort, Arcane Intellect, buffing the casters, mass AoE profile on Destro, Boomkin verse buff, all that. Or if you're playing once again melee, Prop Paladin, Mistweaver, Enhanced Shaman, Feral, Arms. You could even slot in like BM here over Feral if you wanted, depending where it goes. maybe even like a Havoc Game Hunter's third slot, depending how bad it is. But I mean, honestly, dude, like if you're looking at not even just like a range or melee specific comp, you could just see. I feel like, I don't know. You throw in like a prop paladin. I mean, I'm not super up on healers, like I said, like as much as somebody like Jack who does this all the time. I feel like prop paladin disc, you can swap in. Holy, let's go disc. I don't know where it's at exactly. I've heard Mythic mentions as well, but like you guys go like Fire Mage. I feel like Fire Mage, Ellie Shaman, and like X. It doesn't need to be like full melee or full range comp, give or take, right? I mean, even in full range comps, we're talking about it in Guild as well. Like you sort of are lacking when it comes to kicks at times. If you're playing like if you're playing VDH over prop paladin, right? Like you're playing VDH like disc, whatever, Fire Mage, like Fire Mage, Dash Lock, and like I don't know, other range, like Balancer or whatever have you, right? You're sort of lacking on kicks in a sense, right? Too. Maybe you're just playing like maybe it just comes down to you're playing the best of X classes. You're just playing a prop paladin, disc, Fire Mage, and then maybe like an enhance and or second, maybe it is like second Fire Mage. Honestly, I don't know. They seem like they're just all sort of in a league of their own when it comes to raw damage. I mean, there is redundancy, but at the same time, when you have everything, redundancy ain't that bad, right? So I don't know. We'll see. Destro, I'm just sort of split on it in like a non-caster comp, whatever. Like it really doesn't bring anything, and it's just besides like the damage profile that it has. I don't think Destro's like good enough to be like, if you're not considering pure range comp, in that just 3 best DPS out there. I feel like Boomkin is sort of similar when it comes to having Mark of the Wild, having not like the same AV profile, but similar, a bit squishier, I guess. But it's hard to say. If it's not a pure melee, a pure range comp, you're looking at, I mean, maybe second Fire Mage and or like, I mean, BM's up there, Ellie's up there too as a possible thing. I feel like Arms wouldn't make the cut in this necessarily, but it's still good. You're looking at like maybe Ellie as a possibility, maybe BM, maybe this, right? I feel like Boomkin's a bit more universally relevant than Feral is, but I don't know. It's hard to say. Depends a bit on comps and utility and all that, but there's a handful of options. But regardless, we can all rejoice that Aug is dead. Thank God.